Hello, my name is Jeanette Shalika. We are celebrating VGA's 7th birthday, and I have the amazing Christine Cohen here for our next presentation that's called In Black and White. Don't always believe what you read in the newspapers, the Owen family. Okay, so here we go. Christine, take it away.
Well, happy birthday, VGA. I know I've been around for 7 years, I believe. So let's talk about my Owen family and what I found in the newspapers for them that isn't always exactly right. This is my second great grandfather. As you can see, he looks quite the character there, barefoot with the long beard. And he was married, I believe, twice. As we can see, um, on the left to Priscilla Lunger, who I believe died, and then he was married to, I believe, Emma Blake, but I am not sure. That's a kind of a sketchy line for me. I'm not really sure if they ever really got divorced or what. But let's talk about what I found about this family in the paper. So, first of all, I want to introduce you to daughter number two. And just keep in mind, we've talked a lot about newspaper research, but realize when daughter number two died, her name became Mrs. John Fick. Now, she was Viola Dixon Owen Fick, but in her obituary, did not have that identity. So do searches like that when you're doing research. And in her obituary here, it states that she was born in 1855 in Illinois. And every document I have ever found states that she was born in Pennsylvania. It states that she and her husband, John, were married in Illinois also. And every document I found, including their marriage certificate, was in Iowa. It also states that they homesteaded in Missouri. And actually, I have their homesteading document, and they abandoned it. And it was actually in Decatur County, Kansas, not Decatur County, Missouri, as listed there. Then we go on to her children, whose names seem to really vary a lot. So be creative in your searches. They mention Mrs. Zeta Haynes. Zeta's name over the years has metamorphosized to Emma, Emma R., Rosetta, and Rosita, and then somehow became Zeta. Son Bert, I have seen as Burton Robert B., Benton Robert, Benton, and then RB. Harry is often listed as just HW. Her daughter Alice is listed as Alice Debo. Now I've seen her as Deba or Debolt. Daughter Mabel's name, Mabel, seems to vary a lot. And son Earl is listed here, but everything I've found ever about him, he is Millard Earl. And then Charles and Elmer listed here are often written just as their initials. And lastly, my ancestor, who they list as Sherman, whose name was William Sherman or WS, and I've never found a document where he only uses the name Sherman. So be very creative in your searches. Now, son number four of Samuel here is named Elmer. Now, he has a wife who had a very interesting and unique name, Johanna Arminthia, going by Minnie, Sivard van Valkenburg Owen. Now, I found her article about her in the newspaper, and it seems like an infomercial on the left here, where she advertised how that she took this medicine, this treatment called Sargon, and the treatment saved her life, and she was so grateful to it. And this was written in May of 1930 in the Oklahoma News. Now, unfortunately, though, for Minnie, within 6 months, by December, she died. So I don't know that Sargon really helped her that much. And then what's also kind of interesting in her obituary is it says she is survived by her husband, Elmer, and she only has one daughter. But when we go and look in the census and we look and find her, she was married previously to Mr. Van Valkenburg, and it states that she was 17, he was 42, and then she married Elmer, and in the census in 1900, she randomly has 12 children, and 7 of them are still living. And in 1910, she has 14 children, and 6 still living. And I have documented these children living much beyond that year, but she randomly on in the obituary only had one child. So she went from 14 to 1, which I do not believe is correct. It also talks about in 1910, they ask about marriage and how long you've been married. Well, Oddly, she seemed to take the census taker's question at heart and stated she'd been married 30 years, which would have been 1880. Well, that was her marriage to the first husband, Richard, not the marriage to the second husband. So definitely research and vet everything you find in the census in addition to the newspapers. Now, this is another child of his. This is Elmer. We talked about his wife, but Elmer had a very sad life where I found him in 1909. Uh, he killed his child accidentally. And I just thought it was kind of interesting in the document in the newspaper in 1909 that I got from the Library of Congress, the Evening Times Republican, the daughter that was killed was 2-year old. But then in the Ottumwa Semi-Weekly Courier, the daughter all of a sudden became 4 years old. So do not take everything written in those newspapers as black and white is correct. It may be changed and who knows, metamorphosized. I did find, though, an interesting little article. Now, according to my grandmother, he was kicked in the head, and that's why he was declared insane. There was no family story that was passed down that he actually killed his daughter and then attempted to take his own life. But at least in this newspaper article, he talked about that the judge was worried that he would kill himself because of what happened. So family stories can kind of metamorphosize again as to what really happened, perhaps to soften the blow. So we find him then institutionalized, and I found him in the census living there. And I learned a little bit about his records, or a little bit about him being in the Cherokee Lunatic Asylum. Unfortunately, these records are held behind a wall, and I would never be able to get them. But this helped explain that why he was there. I was always under the impression, as my grandmother said, he was hit in the head from a horse, and that's why he was there. But actually, he killed his child, and that's why. Now, look about another child of Samuel is named Charles. So, Charles lives in Missouri, and I encourage you to look for obituaries of your ancestor in their children's newspaper. So, Samuel dies in Oklahoma, but Mr. Owen lives in Iowa, and they report about his father's passing. S.W. Owen dies in Oklahoma City. I was found this awesome, and it gave lots of great detailed information. But the newspaper talks about various children. Elmer, I've introduced you to Sherman, my ancestor, Viola Fick, and such. And then the last one says Mrs. Libby Shaw of Illinois. So this is in a Missouri newspaper. And I was like trying to figure out who in the world is Libby Shaw? I don't have any Libby Shaws. Well, after a little analysis and looking at his children, I realized that Libby Shaw was actually Mrs. Elizabeth Owen Schaff. So when it got reported in the Missouri newspaper, her name magically changed from Elizabeth to Livy, and her last name magically changed from Schaff to Shaw. So again, be very creative. These newspapers are a great resource, but they desperately, desperately need to be vetted and really thoroughly searched. Now, Samuel himself was quite the character. And in when he lived in Oklahoma, I found this little article about him. So I thought it was kind of hubris of him. So he, I guess, reads an article in the local newspaper there that talks about a gentleman named Samuel People who claims to have the distinction of being the oldest and longest married man of Marblehead, Missouri. But according to Samuel Owen, he has nothing on that. Owen read the story and at age 92 married 71 years. Well, Mr. Owen is 94 and he's been married for 74 years, has 13 children, 30 grandchildren, 70 great grandchildren, and he was a Civil War veteran and lives on Harvey Street. Well, he is 94 years old, but I am 99.9% sure that he was not married for 74 years, and I do not have any reason to understand why he states that. He did have 13 children and more than 30 and 70 grandchildren, but he wanted to brag about the length of this marriage. So I did find him, being buried in Oklahoma, listing himself in the Civil War veteran, and that's accurate. I did find him in a city directory in the census, so that is accurate. But when we go and look at the census, back in 1900, He says that he's divorced from the second wife. So I don't quite understand how he believes that he was married for 74 years. In the 1915 South Dakota census, he's magically became a widow. And in the 1920 census, he again is a widow. So I don't know quite why he thinks he was married for 74 years and needed to go tell the newspaper about it, but he did. So, just to finish off here in my little short presentation, newspapers can be very useful in research, but research every genealogical piece of information for accuracy because they may or may not have been correct. So, thank you and happy birthday to VGA. And with that, I'll stop sharing and send it back to Jeanette for our next Cahoots game.